Aloha everybody, welcome back to Crazy Top Story. Shout out to our sponsors, Dubuka, Center for Global Education and Exchange, Chancellor's Office, and Kuleana. We've had terrific talks these past 2 weeks, and I will enjoy something for this one. I think today's talk will be very informative. Today's guest is Fire Chief Kazuo Todd, who's been serving the Hawaiʻi Fire Department for 21 years now. He is also the chair of the Hawaiʻi State Fire Council, and he serves with this servant leadership kind of mindset or philosophy, where really the community's needs guides how he leads. And so today he's going to talk about the Kuleana of his Kuleana and the Kuleana of the fire department and our Kuleana, our part in all of this. So without any further ado, please welcome Fire Chief Todd.
Okay, I might pace a little bit, but I got a PowerPoint, and then we'll break off into individual sections, I guess, and then we'll come back and talk some more at the end of this. But today's talk is about Kuleana and resilience, and how we care for our land, property, and protect our communities. I am, again, Fire Chief Kazuo Todd. My name is Kazuo Scott Leslie Todd. When I was born, my mother thought I would be the only child she had, so she gave me all the names. But I pretty much grew up and went to Hilo Union, Hilo Inter, Hilo High, Hilo, and then the fire department offered me a job, and I ended up down at Hawaii Community College later on in my career as I decided to go and get a degree within my field of, I guess, work, so to speak. I have 2 degrees. One is an associate's degree in fire science from Hawaii Community College, and then I also transferred my credits to Colorado State and have a bachelor's degree in fire and emergency services administration, which is sort of useful since I administer a fire service organization. I think it's important that when we start, we always have an end goal in mind. So in the conversation that we're going to have today, I'm going to be talking about sort of the general problems that exist. And primarily we'll be talking about natural disaster fire. But I think the reality of it is that there's really on every person to solve the problems. And so we'll talk about the problems, but my goal for you at the end of this is to understand maybe what you can do and what your responsibility is in terms of addressing those problems. And there's a variety of suggestions I'll throw out there as well. But understand, like, the goal here isn't to just come here, eat some nice chips and some fruits, and then go, that was cool, and leave. The goal is to think about, like, where do I have responsibility? Where do I have Kuleana in terms of solving the issues that are facing us today? So, there's many places we could be, right? There's all 49 other states, there's other countries, there's a whole world out there. But we're here in Hawaii, and I think that's important. So before we kind of dive into your responsibility and your Kuleana, I think it's first important to recognize our blessings. There are a lot of things going on in this world. There's a lot of places you could be, but you are here. You're in a first world country. You're in my opinion, the best state within that first world country. And a little biased here, also the best island, in my opinion, in that state. You have opportunities that others do not have. And I'll be honest with you, the world is not always nice. From the Uyghurs who have been rounded up in China, about 450,000 of them in concentration camps, to the Ukraine, where we have 46,000 fatalities so far in the war, to the Palestinians who've been rounded up and kicked out of areas of Gaza, to the Rohingya who've been subject to genocide based on their race and their historic and ethnic practices. There's a lot of things out there that are pretty bad. And yet you sit here, and it's not so bad over here. But even in Hawaii, we have people that are homeless, that are living in shacks or tents on the side of the street. Understand that even for the lowest stratus of the people living in Hawaii, Their access to medical care, flowing water, opportunity for education, social services is better than most places that you would think. 700 million people on this planet live on less than $2.50 a day. So even the lowest person on our society that is living in a tent down in Bayfront has access to more health-related things to make the quality of life better than a large percentage of the people out there on the planet. All right? You, all of you, are sitting in a beautiful university, getting an education which hundreds of years ago was only allowed to the privileged and elite, if that. There are still places on this planet where women are not allowed to be educated, where your opportunities to go to higher education don't exist. And so my premise for this is that we have benefited from the seeds that have been planted from those who came before us, from those that founded our country, from those that set up the university system in Hawaii, from those that are actual parents and their grandparents who got a job and came to this island to work, or had started a business, or just worked at 8 to 5 to make sure that food was on your table when you came home growing up. We benefit from those before us. And my premise of this is that we are blessed to live in Hawaii, to have these opportunities, to live this life. No matter whether you are at the very bottom of the social strata in Hawaii in terms of economics, or the very top, you are still blessed. And with that blessing comes the responsibility of Kuleana. That's my premise. That is the Ka'ala fire. It's approximately 470 to 500 acres that have burned so far. It's up in Hamakua, and my firefighters are actually fighting that fire right now. We've been there for over a week. It is not a small fire. And you can see where we've taken a dozer and we've cut off the fire, stopped it from spreading, and we've gone in with hand tools. And I have personnel from my department, the Department of Forestry and Wildlife, and the National Park Service, as well as a whole host of agencies out there to support. But they're out there to make sure that this fire doesn't come into one of our communities somewhere on the island, because the potential exists that if we just let it go, eventually it will hit someone's homes, and we can see similar type events like that. It would seem like this is a big fire, 500 acres. Not many people have a parcel of 500 acres, but the reality is it's actually a pretty small fire. This is Mono Road. It happened in 2021. It was 44,000 acres. Our current fire that we're fighting, we've been there for a week, is literally 1% of a fire that we fought just 4 years ago. This is our future. What I'm going to talk about today, and some of the problems that I'm going to throw at you, is that we are living in a changing world. And more recently, we've seen the return of urban conflagration. Basically, that means city disappears, town disappears because of fire. Now, this was a problem in the early 1900s. Apparently, there was a cow, it maybe kicked over, handle, and then Boston burned out. So, I don't know, but the city did burn down, and that was a problem. And with a problem, everyone recognized that they had Kuleana to solve it. And so they came together, and they created building codes, and electrical code, and also plumbing codes, because it's good for the poop to go away and fresh water to come into the sink for health reasons. And a variety of other basically guidelines on how we're going to build houses so that they would survive earthquakes, or that if there was a fire, people get treated out and they wouldn't die. Horrible deaths, right? However, in the last decade, we've seen a return of conditions that we have not seen in 100 years. And the reason is it's different. In the past, our fires moved from building to building, from area to area, just because of proximity and what we were building our buildings out of, which was wood. And we were like, hey, if we're going to put the buildings together, we got to do things like concrete. Or we got to push them far apart, right? Or we got to do things to make sure that the fire will not spread. We've done a good job. But recently we run into issues. So So this is the 2018 Camp Fire in Paradise, California. A 60-cent part from a high voltage electrical line failed. 19,000 homes and 88 people were killed. It was the largest fatality of an American urban conflagration until ʻāina. In 2021, Marshall Fire in Boulder, Colorado. In one evening, 100-mile-an-hour winds fanned the flames and the embers and burned down over 1,000 homes. More recently and more personal to us, in 2023, the Hawaiʻi Fire happened. 2,200 homes, $5 billion in infrastructure, and 102 fatalities. And then this year, we are in the process of breaking all new records. The LA fires in Palisades and Oakland, California, we estimate somewhere between 38 and 438 fatalities. We're not sure yet. They're still digging through the remains. And somewhere between $23.8 and $44.8 billion in infrastructure is now gone. My premise is this is our future. And this is a problem. But the problem doesn't just stop with the fire. The problem happens even after the fire. Because when the rains come in, and the grass is not there to hold the soil in, and all the toxic chemicals from all the stuff in our homes are burned, and they're sitting there in piles of ashes, they're washed into the ocean, because everything is connected. And so it leads to our coral reefs dying off, and our local fish disappearing, and this damage can last a very, very long time. So it's not as simple as just, there was a fire, we gotta build new houses. We see a lot of connections with a lot of things we do. I hate to be pessimistic, but here's a prediction for you. By 2027, we will have another urban conflagration, and we will lose another town, city, and probably thousands of homes somewhere. This is because all the houses that we've built today are not designed for this kind of change in our environment, in our weather patterns, and they're not designed to survive. However, it doesn't mean that we can't take our current homes and allow them to survive. In fact, in ʻāina, this was that miracle house. But the miracle house was not by any means the only house. Many houses in the area did survive. Some because of luck, but many because they were actually built for more modern codes, or they taken care of the things that are important. And there are things that we can do to make a difference in our ability for fire to come through a community and all the houses to still be there. It starts with what we know as the home ignition zone. And we found that everything within about 5 feet to the house, ideally, should not be combustible. So if we're piling a bunch of garbage on the side of our houses, and then a fire comes through, that could be a problem. There's little things that can be done. And they basically broken up the areas around homes into 0 to 5, to 5 to 30, and 30 to 100 feet, and what we can do and how we can make changes to actually make our homes safer. Because this is what we're going to be facing. This is what's known as an ember storm. An ember storm is essentially, just think of that time where you start a charcoal grill and then you put the fan out and make it go a little farther, and then all the little embers are flying up, except times like 1 billion. Because it's a house that's actually on fire, or a forest, and the winds are coming through somewhere between 50 to 100 miles an hour, and for miles, every house in the direction of wherever this thing that is burning is going to be rained on by embers falling from the sky and dropping all over the house. It's like a big bag of lit charcoal that's getting shaken over your home. And so if you've got trash on the side of the house, if you've got things that are combustible on the side of the house, there's a very good chance that they start on fire. Houses are actually, generally speaking, non-combustible. In the sense that, me throwing a bunch of embers on the side of the house isn't going to magically catch fire just because there's a whole piece of ember. The physics on it don't really allow for it. However, if there's something on the side of the house that's a little bit more capable of catching fire, such as like some rolled up newspapers, some trash. I don't know if you guys throw your cardboard boxes in the garage before you take them to the dump. All of those things are far, far more likely to catch fire. And we find that after the fire is ripped through the community, a little bit later, all of a sudden there's a fire in a garage, or a fire under someone's house, and the next thing you know, the house is on fire. There's also issues in that many of our houses aren't designed in a way that's particularly vulnerable. Most of us live in a very nice tropical place, and so the need to close our windows at night, or during the day when we come to school or go to work, isn't really there. In fact, you kind of want to leave them open because it keeps the house cool. But if the screen on those windows is plastic as opposed to a metal screen, the embers will, first one will melt it, the second one will come inside and then land on the couch. And the next thing you know, your couch is on fire, and the couch is what actually burns the house down. So these are the things that we face. There are steps that we can take, such as having succulent fire breaks around homes and areas that are in those wildlife urban interfaces, by attaching screens that can be placed on a house or underneath the vent area or above on top of the roof where we have vents on the building itself. And there's things that communities can do, such as having green breaks, such as having lots of grass that goes around the community. A good example of this is Waikoloa, but in reverse. Waikoloa, if you've ever been out there, is a community that protects a golf course. But arguably, it might be better to have a golf course protect the community from a green break or a fuel break perspective. Right? If we've taken all the houses and put them in the middle and had the golf course go around the edge, then we have a nice area where there's water and grass that's going to keep the fire from actually coming up against the homes. So there's things that we can do, and it comes down to planning and architecture and land and a variety of other ways we can do it. On top of the issues with our built environment, we also have problems because the days of our large plantations are over. Laws were changed in Washington, D.C., and it became economically unfeasible to run sugar plantations and pineapple and other things. Now, obviously, we're trying to diversify. People are trying to grow coffee. They're trying now coca to grow chocolate and not coca, but hopefully not growing. They're growing things, and we're looking for alternative agriculture, which is important because what does happen when we have a disaster, right? But a lot of plantation land is now no longer managed. In fact, it's being let to grow. And what happens is this grass, when things there, can lead to later on fire problems because what has happened is that fire-prone invasive species have taken over those parcels. And so we end up with this fire cycle where they catch fire and they spread more of these fire-prone invasive species. And then the next year's season of fire is even bigger. So things have to be considered, like how we're going to manage land, and what are we going to do about these issues? What is everyone's Kuleana? If my neighbor suddenly builds a bunch of houses, does that mean now I have to mow my lawn nearest to my neighbor? I didn't build anything on my land. Why am I now responsible for making sure my neighbor's houses don't burn? All of these questions are being asked right now, and different islands are experimenting with different laws and processes to make each other safe. We're trying to figure out whose Kuleana is to do what. It's actually a pretty complicated subject. Well, I also don't want it to stop at fire, because unfortunately, while we live in one of the most beautiful places in the world, and you are very, very blessed, we are also technically subject to almost every possible disaster. In fact, we are subject to every possible disaster on this island that exists. From lava coming in and burning your house and pushing it and crushing it, to hurricanes that can come and whip through our island chain, to tsunamis that can come in and wipe out our coastal areas, and flooding that can come after those big rains. All of this is a potential problem. And to make things harder, we don't have bridges. Not to the mainland and not even between islands. So getting resources from island to island is actually pretty tough. As I run a fire department and Lahaina burns, the Big Island was actually very, very committed initially. I had 7 fires on this island on the same day. And in the Kohala region, I had 4 major fires that ripped through that area. I had over 58 responding units fighting the fires in that region, and we did lose 2 bridges and a warehouse, but I didn't lose any residential structures. I my personnel, the partners that we work with, such as the Department of Forestry and Wildlife and the National Park Service and our volunteer firefighters, did an amazing job on fighting the fires that came through and ripped through our community. We did evacuate on August 8th, the same day Lahaina burned 5 communities as we fought those fires. But after the fire, and the following day when we found out about Lahaina, the first step was, well, how do we send resources? And actually in Hawaii, it is really, really hard. Because we don't have bridges, and because everything needs to be shipped. And that makes things very, very hard. So, when we talk about our Kuleana, we have to consider how can we best be resilient not only because we're subject to all these disasters, but because health is not likely to come quickly or easily. But let's make things even harder, right? You guys live in probably one of the most interesting times in human history. But as it is one of those interesting times, we see all kinds of stuff going on in the world that you may be subject to. We've seen our political divides grow deeper as the countries become polarized, and it's not just America that this is happening in. It's just a buildup of military force and armed conflict around the globe. We've seen climate change come in and drive water sources, which is causing migration and social and economical pressures as people are trying to move so that they can meet their basic needs. And of course, we have AI coming in, which maybe it solves everything, or maybe it just takes away everyone's job. We are not exactly sure where we go with it, but this will be one of the problems placed on your lap as you move forward into the future. So the question really is like we sit here and we have all these problems, and what is that pathway for? And my argument to you is that it is through Kuleana and shared responsibility that we will make our pathway forward. We all have Kuleana. Understand that when the fires are out there, it's not just the fire department's responsibility and you have no stake in it. Preparing your house, preparing yourself, and being educated are all important things to consider before things go wrong. You know, there's a lot of other people who have come and done Kuleana talks. This is the one from Kuleana, but I screenshot of them because they have pictures as opposed to this one, kind of, a little bit left there that I can find. But some of the things they talked about was agriculture, architecture, our reefs and biodiversity in the reefs, as well as just business in general. And my premise to you is all these things are interconnected. And all of these are part of our Kuleana. Whether it's making sure that when a disaster happens that we have fruits and other food growing on the island so that we can be resilient and feed ourselves without having to worry about food being shipped in, or making sure that fires don't happen or that they aren't so bad that we don't ruin our reefs by having runoff go in and kill off all our own fish, or by becoming an architect so that you can design better communities, or a planner so that the communities themselves can avoid fire breaks around them. All of these are potential solutions and ways that we can express our Kuleana. So, here's some recommendations. We're going to ask a question a little bit, and I'm going to have you guys break off into groups and discuss things. But here's some ways that all of us could decide that we want to tackle the problems that exist for us. One could be getting politically involved, reaching out. It could be starting with like USA, Student Association over here. I may have been a senator back when I attended. They recognized me randomly when I walked in one day. It's fascinating. It could be joining a volunteer organization. These are some of the volunteer organizations that are active in disaster on this island. American Red Cross, Salvation Army. Right now in my Ta'ala fire, Salvation Army has spent over $30,000 to supply meals to my responders so far. HWMO, the Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization, and they do some amazing work, and they're a 501c3. Team Rubicon assembles and goes out to the field mitigation projects and makes the island safer and responds after disasters. You have people who are doing emergency communications for amateur radio. And so our island ever suffered massive catastrophe where cell phones are no longer working because camera operators, half of them in the state are on this island. We can still continue talking to each other. We have active CERT teams, community emergency response teams, and Vibrant Hawaii is out there building resilience hubs all over the island. So all of these groups are out there. You could also volunteer for the Hawaiʻi Fire Department. As you know, I said I had 50 units fighting that fire on August 8th in the Kahala region. A large chunk of them were actually volunteer firefighters from my department. So there's different ways you can volunteer. It could be what you can do is repairing your own home. Maybe you can work with getting shutters for a hurricane or applying hurricane braces, Simpson contacts, or by putting the appropriate mesh in to prevent embers from being able to accumulate in areas in your house where they start a fire. It could be preparing yourself, having food supply should a disaster happen so that at least for a couple of weeks you don't have to worry about some federal organization that may or may not show up anytime soon. It could be about having a go bag so that if you're in a community where you have to worry about evacuating, you're ready to go and you know your evacuation routes. It could be about just being educated about all the issues that exist for your particular situation, right? All of these are potential ways to express your kuleana, because the reality is that there's a lot of major issues out there. And maybe you want to tackle one of them. You're young, your whole life ahead of you. Opportunity exists from dealing with our climate change and all the issues that we've come across with our current industrial age, to dealing with water shortages because of that climate change, to dealing with the fact that we have a housing crisis in the United States and it's just hard for people to find places to live in an affordable race, to dealing with the fact that we have a lot of endangered species out there that are in need of help. So, as I said at the beginning, we want to begin with the end in mind. So, our breakout session, we're going to go to small groups, will be simple. We're going to look at the topic of how can you practice kuleana today, through caring for your land, or educating yourself, or changing your home, so maybe preparing yourself, or supporting others in ways that strengthen our community and resilience for tomorrow. And the goal for all of you, as we explore this in these small groups, is to actually consider what you specifically plan to do. You're like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. I don't care. I want to know what you individually plan to do based on the information presented to you today. All right, you got to turn over to you.
Let's see what one small groups, like 5 or 6 of us. It sounds like you got like actual homework, so you actually have to come up with like, this might be good. I'm going to go around and ask this one of those ideas. So go ahead and maybe we should talk about it in maybe 10 minutes or so, and come back and remind you through.
So even though we're streaming this, right?
Yeah, so then you go through it
And then
That's the land of some of the
some of our group members have unfortunately had fires and disasters in the past, so it's very personal.
All right. What's your name?
Nico,
Nico. All right, boss. What do you think about your personal Kuleana?
I think that these are both two that are pretty on and then educate them about the eyes and
Okay.
the
JB. All right, boss. What do you think about yourself?
feel like I don't know if you need to go to player about emergency procedures
So you're gonna go home today. What are you gonna do with this?
ask my family if they know anything about
Put this back in your family. Okay.
Dahlia.
Oh, yeah, nice to meet you, darling. So, what about you? What do you do?
Well, and after I talk, I realized that I'm definitely not today. But after today, I will definitely suggest to go back and just to be prepared for any,
I'm Maria. Kind of same thing, what I was saying, very much not prepared. I kind of landed at home, so one thing happened is that it was very bad. We always, kind of what you're saying, we just throw our carpet in the garage and just leave it there until we take it out. So now I'm gonna try putting it actually there to keep my trash, which is like far from my house.
That's a step. All right. What about you? Okay.
My name is Tyler, so things I can do to prepare is partially what we talked about here, and we talked about the safety side of it, make sure that all of our people
Okay.
Jared.
All right, Derek, what are you gonna do?
So I'm going to say, so I look at anybody the covers and all the specific stuff. I look for if there's a if you emergency repair guy.
So, by show of hands, how many people have at least like 2 weeks of food at home? You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Not bad, honestly. I also have actually one of those buckets. It's on Amazon, it's like $100. Don't expect any of the food in there to actually be tasty. What their calories, and if stuff goes wrong, I'm like, oh, all I need is a couple of cases of water and that bucket of probably all pasta with bad sauce, I don't know. But you know, in a pinch it will probably work, right? How many of you are in a community where you worry about wildfire? All right. Have you considered that if you have to evacuate, because they call for evacuation, where you would drive and where you would go? Yes? Not yet. Okay, well, you know, something to think about, right? All right. How many of you are living close enough to the ocean that a tsunami might be a problem? Okay. Maybe. Close enough? There's maybe. Okay. If you're like, maybe. Close enough. All right. Do you guys have a plan? Not yet. No? Did you guys evacuate this last time? We had a tsunami. Just like 2 weeks ago, right? I think it was. We actually had a tsunami come, evacuated all of Tokaha and the low-lying areas. Anyone actually evacuated down? You did? Okay. All right. How did it go?
That was my grandparents in, Portland, so.
Okay. How was the traffic?
So I was actually coming from Hilo, so it's horrible.
Now, if the tsunami had hit, and when I mental exercise for you guys, what do you guys think would happen? If we had like a really bad 1960, 1946 type tsunami, what do you think would happen to our island? Anyone? Shipping would be a problem. Well, let's think, like what do we need in the day-to-day? We're sitting in a room with air conditioning, with lighting, with food, on the table. Does the tsunami affect any of that? Good. So where does the power come from? Power plant. What fuels the power plant? Not coal, but generally speaking, petroleum distillates, right? Various types, from crude to naphtha and similar. You guys know where we store most of the petroleum distillates on this island? So right at the docks, right by the water, where tsunami was taken out. There's 10 million gallons of petroleum and about 1 million gallons of LPG and Hilo, and then another 1 million gallons of petroleum and Hawaiʻi, both right next to the docks. So yeah, tsunami came in. About 40% of the island's power is produced by various renewables, whether it be solar or wind and things like that. But the other 60% comes from petroleum. So once the tsunami hits, within a few weeks, most of our power plants are going to run out of energy. And so you're going to have to bare minimum rolling blackouts. The other thing that's going to happen is potentially we will not be able to power the supermarkets that store the food or other critical facilities, which is going to be a problem with food storage and our ability to eat. There'll be a problem with your own refrigerators at home because we may not be able to power your house. So, as you think about all the Kuleana from fire or other disasters, I want you to think about how do I survive in a condition such as a major tsunami where there is no power, where there is no refrigeration, and how can I make my house safer even if it is not in an area that is subject to the tsunami, it is still subject to the tsunami on this island. So things to think about, right? I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Does anybody have one or two questions for Chief Todd?
I have a question, maybe a sensitive issue, but I'm curious. We've been getting a lot of emergency alerts for brush fires on Hawaii.
Yeah.
And is someone setting these, or do we just get started?
I have two questions running around.
That was they're coming so often that it just seemed like it was a bad after hours.
And there's one in the Hawaiʻi region and one in Hawaii. I think they know who they are, who these things stuff like that. We're working to try to catch them in the act, because it's a little bit hard. One of the problems with people who, you have homeless, you have mental issues, you have a variety of reasons that they might start fires. But one of the problems is that the island is so big that it's very hard to prove that they did anything. Because they can go out there and then wait until no one's around, and then they start fire and they leave, and so no one ever sees them starting a fire. You can't arrest anyone without evidence. Even if you're like, I'm pretty sure it's them. So there needs to be evidence. Recently in Honolulu, they actually caught the guy who started a Kuleana fire in the area of the captain. Over the last year, since August 8th when Lahaina burned, I've been working with Hilo, and we've installed the alert west camera system, which is an AI camera system all over the island. Allows us to watch fires remotely in real time, and it has AI detection for fire. So we actually trigger if they see smoke columns, and our personnel will get sent out. Hopefully we catch fires earlier. But it also helps in the rest of that particular person in Honolulu for that arson issue. But yeah, I think at this time the year normally we would see about 30 fires to that Okua region. We're up at like 75. I had a fire last night. Approximately an acre on the 39-mile mark, about halfway between Hilo and Hawaii. If you're interested and you want to know about wildfire, just in case there's something going on, there's an app called Watch TV. It is very effective. It's more effective than even my internal communications within my own department, because it's basically volunteers in the mainland sitting and listening to radio channels from all over the world or all over America. And the moment someone on the radio gives details, they're typing it in and pushing out an update. So I've actually had my phone tell me there's a fire from an external basically app before my internal guys had called me up and said, hey Chief, we got a fire. The moment they dispatch and guys are en route and we're given some basic information, it's going up there. My personnel may not even be on scene to verify, and there's already information rolling through the app. So it's pretty impressive. Any other questions?
I was going to say, for students, just quickly, you should have gotten, they tested the rave alert system, but you all, I think, were automatically subscribed. not, you need to talk to folks about that. And then also you can sign up for a county alert messages that come straight to your phone.
I have 2 helicopters, 3 boats, 6 jet skis, 240 vehicles, from fire trucks to brush trucks to off-road tankers, on-road tankers, regular trucks, and you name it. Yeah, I have an ND 500 helicopter and an H-125 helicopter, and then theoretically, like, I need more, but I start bringing in military assets, UH-60 Black Hawks, stuff like that. So like on this fire truck you mentioned, I brought in 2 Black Hawks and a truck is the long one with the double propeller. Yeah, it can take a lot of water to get up and drop down cars. The downside is the cattle owners are not super happy that we stole all their water without a fire. Yeah, so we're in the process of trying to refill all their upland tanks. Right now, Honolulu is in deep freeze drought. It is drier than it's ever been. I was driving on my island yesterday, even Oahu is very, very dry. Yeah, these are parties, maybe the simplest process don't start fires. Our Monterey Road fire was 45,000 acres, which is involving. Yeah, Parker Ranch had a vendor that was doing fence walling for the cattle, and that the sparks from that actually ended up starting a fire. Any other questions?
How many can you know about it?
Well, we have a variety of qualifications. Now, one of the downsides is we don't have it in Hilo, so you kind of have to look a little bit outside of Hilo currently. And pretty much you can reach out to one of our local law enforcement, or you go to our website, and there's actually a form, and you just, depending on where you live, will pop it over. In the long run, I'd actually been looking to maybe partner with the University of Hawaii Community College, because there is a fire science program, and maybe drop it away, but that is probably many, many years out. We will all graduate from college hopefully by then, or become a potential student partner. But right now, it depends on where you live, and you can put in your name. It is an interesting way to see if firefighting is something that was interested in here. Many of our younger volunteers are those that are actually interested in joining the fire department, and then they go on later on. We hire them, and they become firefighters. And then sometimes they retire, and then they go back to being volunteers. So it's kind of a weird thing. But I have some retired that are my volunteers. I have guys in my career that have started as volunteers. So it's a good way to kind of take a look at the profession. And you can tell by the slides and whatnot, it's not like this business is blowing out of business anytime soon. In fact, if anything, we're going to need more firefighters in the future than ever before.
Fire Chief promising everything's connected because next week we have Captain Stanley Long from the Salvation Army talking about their Kuleana in the community, as they are right now feeding firefighters through wildfires. Also, another connection last week, Joey from Like the Water did give a whole paddle of water to the efforts as well with the Salvation Army. So it's kind of cool how everything's connected. And I like that we're focusing a lot on Kuleana for this series. So we're going to be careful about it. Please go ahead and fill that out. That information helps us a lot. But if not, we're going to everybody.